So many people hear about bullet journaling, give it a shot, but then they fall into one of these 3 pitfalls that ruins the whole experience for them. And the saddest part is it could have worked really well if they just avoided these beginner mistakes. So here they are and some practical tips on how to avoid them. And stick around till the end because I'll be sharing a step-by-step guide on exactly what to do when you're first getting started bullet journaling. The number one reason why people quit bullet journaling is because they feel overwhelmed. There's a honeymoon phase where you get excited enough to power through setting up your journal, but then once you've set it up, you've accrued so much overhead in terms of supplies, the spread complexity, the time itself, that it no longer becomes fun to maintain. So here's what you can do instead to avoid this. I want you to get clear on the top 2 pain points you have in your life right now, and then work backwards to pick the tool in your bullet journal that you're going to use to solve that. Here are some of the really common pain points people have when they get into bullet journaling and the corresponding tool that I recommend using to solve each of those. And you're going to focus on just those 1 or 2 things for the first 2 months. Then feel free to add more, but only 1 at a time. So the second most common reason why beginners quit bullet journaling is because they let perfectionism ruin the experience for them. This often shows up first when they're setting up their spreads for the first time. They've seen Ryder, the founder of the bullet journal method, and his recommended setup, but then they've seen artists and how they do it very fancily. Then there's the productivity people who have their own way, and so they have a lot of ideas on how it should look, and they spend a lot of time measuring everything out, making sure it's like perfect for them. It's just an intense process, and if they mess up, then they got to start all over again, which becomes really draining. And that's just for the setup. So once they get past that point, the perfectionism shows up in their words too and what they're writing down. Because if you can't tolerate having a misspelled word or having it crossed out squiggly, then you're going to have to think really hard about everything you're writing, and that just makes the writing not fun.
Sometimes when you just get busy, you're like, I just got to get shit done, and I cannot be precious about writing down each thing slowly and intentionally into a journal. It just wasn't working.
So how do we not let our perfectionism ruin our bullet journal experience? 1, you can sabotage the whole perfectionism mission in the first place by adding some kind of blemish on the page, maybe tearing off a little bit of the page if you're feeling real sassy, or not using a ruler so heavily when you're setting up your lines. You can also address this by just setting a time limit for your spreads. And once the time gets kind of low, you're going to realize you have to just keep going, and then it relieves the pressure of making it perfect. Finally, 3 times a day, preferably like morning, afternoon, evening, I want you to write in your rapid log how you're currently feeling. I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling motivated, I'm feeling angry. Those lines by themselves aren't that interesting, which is the point, actually. Just touching in with your emotions and writing it down, it makes it easier to just stay in the present because you're just thinking about what you're feeling right now. There's no right or wrong answer, and it gets you in the habit of just letting things go and not making it super perfect. A bonus tip is to use a scratch piece of paper, and if you're unsure of things that you might want to keep or not, you can put it on the scratch piece of paper. Oftentimes, a lot of things in there will just be nonsense that you won't care about, and then you just recycle it once you're done. If it does end up being super relevant long term, you can copy it into your bullet journal. You kind of get the best of both worlds because your journal isn't going to be super noisy, but you're also not going to have to overthink everything you're writing. Before we dive into the third and last one, let me say that if you are getting some value from this, then go ahead and subscribe now. It's a little thing, but it really helps me a lot. So click that button. You do it? Okay, cool. Let's go on to the third one. The last major mistake beginners make when they're bullet journaling is locking themselves into a certain structure that they're stuck with until they eventually fall out of love with it and quit altogether. Here's how this happens. You think, I don't love setting up my spreads, like I kind of just want to be done with it, so let me just set up like 6 months or a year's worth of spreads. But then halfway through the first month, you realize, that habit tracker isn't really what I needed, or I don't like that weekly task list as much as I thought I would, or my gratitude practice is just like overrated and I'm not doing it. And slowly, day by day, you fall out of love with the setup, but you've already spent so much time setting it up that you don't want to start over, and you get to the point where you feel so meh that you just quit. So here's what I want you to do instead. Form the habit of iterating your spreads really frequently. You're going to do a bunch of 1 week experiments where at the beginning of the week you just set up 1 week's worth of spreads. Then you just go for it for that week. You don't tweak it, you don't make new ones. At the end of the week, you look back and you reflect about what you liked about that setup, what you want to do in the future, what didn't work, and then you set up the next week's spread. 1 week is enough of a sample size for you to kind of see what is going to work for you and what isn't. And it relieves the pressure of you having to predict what you'll need in the distant future. There's one really important thing you need to do to pull this iteration process off, and that is frequent reflections. Taking stock of where your life is at, where it's going, asking yourself if I'm happy with this, do I need to make any changes? This is so important because if you don't do it, there will be no reason to iterate because you'll mindlessly be going through the motions. So when you reflect, you have some fuel to power you through the next iteration, and it actually becomes a really exciting process. So what does reflecting really look like? Here's how I do it. I'll get a bird's eye view of my life by looking at these things. And then once I do that, there's always some kind of trend. For example, recently I've been traveling a lot and I keep writing in my log like tired, feeling sick of driving everywhere. And I see that happening over and over and I realize, all right, I need to maybe say no to a couple trips and just recenter myself. So once I have that realization, then I set up my next week's spreads in a way that helps me do that. So maybe I have a little more space to doodle, let my mind wander, and a little less space for or always focusing on the logistics. As promised, here's the step-by-step guide for new bullet journalists. On day 1, learn how to rapid log and keep doing that. You can rapid log anywhere and you don't have to set up a fancy spread to do that. After a couple days of that, I would get really clear on your pain point and the tool you're going to use to solve it, and then use those things to set up your first weekly spread. After setting it up, just roll with it for that week, and at the end of the week, step back, reflect, think about what you need to change for the next week, set up the next week's spreads, and then keep going. For those of you who want some extra credit, I'll say during that first week, you should start learning about the mindfulness philosophy that underpins all of the bullet journal techniques, because I think that'll be really motivating. So for that, I would go to the Bullet Journal YouTube or the Bullet Journal Method, which is the book. And there's also a course on bulletjournal.com called Basics and Beyond, which are all great resources for that. Wow. Now I know how to use my bullet journal in a way to avoid the pitfalls and get the most out of it. However, I'm still going to need a digital calendar. I mean, there's no way I'm saving a Zoom link in my bullet journal. It's just not going to happen. The problem is when I use Google Calendar, I end up just filling my slots up mindlessly, going on the hamster wheel, keeping myself busy, and I don't step back, I don't reflect, I don't do the most important thing. So what I did was I made a calendar. I made my own calendar. I just did it. And I did it with the same mindfulness principles as the bullet journal. You want to see it? I mean, it's up right now. You sure? I don't want to. You sure? Okay, let's go. Come on, let's go. And here we are. So aside from just being nice to look at and having a intuitive, fun to use UX, this bad boy can do some of the things that you're used to doing in your bullet journal. Like on the left here, this is the collapsible list for your week, and you can migrate an individual event forward if you don't want to do it that week, in addition to reordering them. And if I go to the next week, you'll see there it is. So that's one of a couple other bullet journal like features we got in here. There's going to be a lot more, including having like a monthly list, a archive or a someday maybe list, and then a way to remind you if you keep doing this forever, migrating things forward, to maybe move it to the archive, as a friendly way to keep things organized, and lots more in addition to that. So if that sounds cool, go to compasscalendar.com and click the Get Started button. Then you'll use your Google account to have your Google Calendar events imported, and within a couple seconds you'll be up and running. If you're on the fence, then I would just do it anyway. You'll get on the email list, and then you can check out when I launch new stuff and be ready to jump in whenever your favorite new feature is added. That's it for this one. I hope I made your bullet journal journey a little smoother, and maybe also your calendar journey. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.